Heavy rain pours over the gloomy city as a severe weather warning flashes across the news. Inside a cozy, dimly lit bookstore, the owner organizes his shelves, bummed out about the total lack of customers. He suddenly smiles, hoping someone might wander in needing shelter from the massive storm. He sets up some hot tea, banking on his top-tier hospitality to guilt-trip a wet stranger into buying a book. Meanwhile, outside in the downpour, a fierce woman with elf ears is throwing down against two masked assassins. She moves like an absolute blur, slashing wildly through them with razor-sharp claws. The last assassin looks paralyzed with fear as her glowing red eyes lock onto him. She finishes him off but clutches her stomach, totally drenched in rain and her own blood. She groans, realizing she just tanked at least 3 broken ribs in that scuffle. With her enemies bleeding out on the cobblestone, she knows her tainted blood needs a full hour to regenerate, leaving her super vulnerable. The lifeless bodies of the assassins are left soaking in the dark alleyway. Desperate for a hiding spot, she spots a warm light cutting through the rain. It's a bookstore, the literal only shop still open in this crazy weather. She hesitates, clutching her torn clothes and wondering if she's walking right into a trap. Pushing her doubts aside, she reaches for the glass door, deciding she has no other choice. The bell chimes as she steps out of the freezing storm and into the quiet shop. The handsome shopkeeper smiles warmly, greeting her like an old friend. Looking at her soaked and battered state, he instantly shifts into full salesman mode, ready to work his magic. He offers her a hot towel, but this extreme level of preparedness immediately sets off her alarm bells. He dries her face, keeping her guard all the way up. In her mind, she's sweating bullets, wondering if this guy is a top-tier assassin from a terrifying secret society. To her enhanced senses, the dude is radiating a monstrous dark aura like a final boss. He cautiously asks if he was waiting for her to arrive. Completely unaware of her panic, he smooth-talks her about how the magic of destiny brings strangers together. He decides to use his first therapy tactic, gently suggesting that she looks like she's in a sticky situation. He gasps, falling right into his conversational trap. The shopkeeper smirks internally, ready to heal her soul and secure a loyal, paying customer. She admits she has a maddening issue, using the chance to probe this mysterious man's true identity. Playing along, he pours her a cup of tea and takes a wild guess that it has something to do with relationships. He hits her with his second tactic, speaking vaguely so the customer fills in the blanks themselves. She completely overthinks it, assuming this dark mage already knows every single detail of her life. He politely offers her a chair so she can get comfortable. As she takes the cup, she panics, convinced he orchestrated the brutal betrayal she just suffered from her own guild. She starts venting about a magic mirror egg that corrupted her allies and ruined years of companionship. She laments how her former friends turned into greedy monsters, wiping out their own crew for profit. The shopkeeper listens intently, but in his mind, he just thinks she's crying over a messy breakup with a cheating ex. She sighs, wondering what the point of seeing their true, vile nature even is. Thinking he's giving solid dating advice, he tells her not to pity the people who hurt her. She is absolutely shook, assuming he wants to use her as a pawn to destroy the hunters. He drops his final targeted suggestion, intensely telling her to go an eye for an eye against the people who wronged her. She stammers, asking if he means she should throw away her humanity, while he just awkwardly pulls out a book. He slides a heavy tome across the desk, thinking it's a dry philosophy read perfectly suited to calm down a heartbroken girl. But to her eyes, the book is a demonic artifact oozing literal torrents of blood. She recoils as massive, shadowy teeth seem to erupt from the cursed pages like a monster. The book is actually a legendary guide on lycanthropy and the insane power contained within tainted blood. She realizes this terrifying shopkeeper just handed her the ultimate cheat code to control the hunter's power structure. He smiles gently, telling her she must face herself honestly, completely clueless about the OP magic he just handed over. Deciding to seal the deal with a cool quote, he steps behind her and places a hand near her shoulder. He recites a dramatic passage from a classic novel, but to her, he looks like a glowing, omnipotent god passing holy judgment. He strikes a dynamic pose, extremely proud of his totally normal, top-tier comforting skills. The shopkeeper wraps up his therapy session, confident that his basic conversation tricks have guided her to the right path. He raises his cup to toast to a new tomorrow, and she eagerly accepts his guidance. She takes a sip, but it's literally boiling water. He panics internally, realizing he might have just cooked her insides. But she chugs it like an absolute tank, leaving him totally stunned as he hands her a library card to sign. He glances at the name Jai Jixu and immediately remembers that she's the only daughter of a famous local millionaire. Dollar signs flash in his eyes as he realizes he just hooked a massive whale to fund his store renovations. Playing it cool, he informs her that the loan period for the cursed book is 1 month. He generously lends her an umbrella for the storm, reminding her to bring it back when she returns the book. She asks to know a bit more about him, and he honestly introduces himself as Lin Jai, just a totally normal bookstore owner. She heads out into the night while he waves goodbye, feeling incredibly proud of his good deed. He throws his arms up in victory, thinking that helping others every day feels absolutely amazing. He assumes this peaceful, charitable life is exactly why he got transported to this world in the first place. Meanwhile, Jai Jixu marches through the rain, hyped up and ready to absolutely destroy the traitor before her book is due. Back inside, Lin Jai picks up a book, and the familiar cover triggers a sudden flashback. Years ago, back in 2017 on Earth, he was just a regular folklore professor working late in the university library. A female colleague checks out for the night, leaving him all alone in the massive archive. She waves goodbye, completely unaware of what he's about to do. Outside, she meets up with a friend who asks if the professor is still lurking inside. She gossips that Lin is a total book-collecting freak who spends his entire salary on reading material. Inside, Lin quietly shelves a book, biding his time. As soon as the coast is clear, his entire demeanor shifts. He stands in the center of the library, activating a colossal glowing magic circle right on the floor. His eyes burn with absolute obsession, willing to pay any price for a glimmer of hope. He slams his hand onto the sigil, desperately wishing to own every single book in the world. At first, the circle fizzles out and he sighs, until a monstrous, grinning shadow entity materializes right behind him. A terrifying, cosmic eye surrounded by fleshy tentacles rips open reality itself, staring directly into his soul. He instantly realizes that crossing this threshold means achieving his dream, but never returning to Earth. Without a single shred of hesitation, he flashes a maniacal grin and accepts the deal. The flashback ends and Lin casually sips his tea in his current shop in the city of Nakan. He reflects that honestly his life here isn't much different from his old one. He's completely unbothered by the demonic ritual, thrilled that he can magically spawn an endless supply of books and casually heal his customers' souls. He stares into his mug, perfectly content with his new gig as a wholesome life teacher. He chuckles, thinking his conversation skills are still incredibly sharp. He smiles smugly, absolutely convinced that the young lady went home completely happy and stress-free. Meanwhile, outside in the pouring rain, Jai Jixu is paralyzed with sheer terror, her golden eyes reflecting a looming figure. A massive, intimidating man in a trench coat and top hat approaches her through the storm. She grates her teeth, realizing her body is completely locked up and she can't even twitch a finger. The man flashes a sinister, jagged smile from beneath his metal mask, noticing the cursed book she's holding. Suddenly, a spectral giant snake coils tightly around her, completely locking her down like a prey animal. The menacing man simply ignores her and walks past, clutching a thick, wrapped book of his own. Once he's gone, the magical pressure lifts and she collapses to the ground in total disbelief. The mysterious man stops right in front of Lin Jai's glowing bookstore. He steps inside and Lin casually greets him like an old friend returning for a visit. Lin cheerfully calls him Old Wilda, asking if he's here to return his overdue book. The terrifying man immediately drops his intimidating aura, politely removing his hat and calling him Mr. Lin. Wilda notices that Lin just had a customer, handing over the wrapped book he borrowed. Wilda praises the text as if it's a mind-bending, monumental masterpiece that totally changed his life. Back out in the alley, Jai Jixu is sweating bullets, confirming the terrifying identity of the man who just walked by. She realizes he is categorized under the highest threat level by the Truth Society. It's Frank Wilda, the Black-Scaled Faceless, a legendary, destructive black mage known for his half-serpent blood and iconic metal mask. Rumor has it that Frank Wilda once went toe-to-toe with a top-tier holy knight. He literally leveled 10,000 square kilometers of land in the fight, earning him the legendary, destructive rank. Out in the alley, Jai Jixu leans against the wall, absolutely hyperventilating. She's mind-blown that the bookstore owner was just casually chatting with a mutant of that god-tier level. Still reeling from the shock, she walks off into the heavy downpour. Back inside the shop, Lin Jai notices his regular customer is looking a bit gloomy. In his head, Lin completely misreads the situation, pitying Wilda as a lonely, empty nester abandoned by his kids. The nostalgic vibe triggers a flashback to when they first met 2 years ago. Going back 2 years in time, the bell chimes as a younger Lin Jai welcomes a customer out of the rain. A highly suspicious, cloaked Wilda enters, but Lin's businessman instincts just see a rich scholar in need of some soul healing. Wilda cautiously asks if the shopkeeper collects rare old books, then smoothly agrees, asking him to wait a moment. He quickly brews up some black tea, hoping to use it as an icebreaker for the spooky guy. Wilda tries to decline, warning that his hideous face scares people, but Lin hits him with some wholesome wisdom about the heart mattering more than looks. Struck by his words, Wilda grins under his mask. He accepts the hospitality, taking off his hood to reveal a massively scarred, muscular physique. Lin is a little freaked out by the weird metal mask but decides not to pry into the guy's trauma. Checking out the heavy tome Wilda brought, Lin figures the guy is just a hardcore linguist. He casually praises the book for its impressive focus on dying, magical languages. Wilda absolutely freaks out, completely shook that Lin can sense the magic through the intense exorcism seals he placed on it. Sweating bullets, Wilda realizes this smiling shopkeeper must be an unfathomably powerful monster hiding his true aura. Desperate for knowledge, Wilda asks for guidance and Lin happily plays along, grabbing a book from the shelf. He slides over a dusty manual on Wenjaonese. Lin playfully jokes that it's the devil's language, referring to it being the hardest dialect in China. To Wilde, the name is quite literal. He drops his teacup in sheer terror, hallucinating that the book is a pulsating, demonic artifact straight from hell. Snapping back to the present, Lin pats himself on the back, thinking his book recommendation was a massive brain play. He makes up a sad story about how the book comes from a lost place called China. He dramatically sighs, mourning that he can never step foot in that splendid ancient civilization ever again. Wilde takes it completely seriously, mesmerized by the lore of this glorious, forgotten empire. The destructive black mage, Lin is an absolutely terrifying cosmic entity wrapped in a human shell. Lin politely asks for his name, and the terrifying mutant humbly introduces himself as Frank Wilde. Wilde mentions that the devil's language gave him a massive breakthrough in his magical research. He solemnly fills out a return form, needing more clues for his dark studies. Smiling like a true salesman, Lin asks if he wants to borrow a similar book. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a man reaches out as he sinks into a deep, watery abyss. Horrifying tentacles and an eerie, glowing humanoid wrap around him, pulling him under. He floats helplessly toward a massive, cosmic entity lurking in the depths. He suddenly snaps back to reality, his eyes wide with pure panic. It's an older knight with a robotic arm, heavily panting in the rainy streets outside the bookstore. He curses, realizing he can't go inside because a cursed sword he carries is literally driving him insane. Once known as the undefeatable Sacred Flame Radiant Knight, he grips his mechanical hand, feeling like nothing but a broken old cripple. Cut to another part of the storm-drenched city. A cloaked figure named Helix, the leader of the White Wolf Guild, stares down at a burning building. He grins evilly, admitting he completely underestimated his former subordinate. Down below, an epic silhouette steps toward the raging inferno. It's Jai Jixu looking absolutely badass and ready for war. Two massive thugs leap out of the shadows, screaming at her to die. She doesn't even blink as a spiked chain whips out, instantly splattering the attackers like water balloons in a brutal splash of blood. Standing over the freshly slaughtered assassins, Max confirms to Jai Jixu that Helix took the magic mirror spawn and went absolutely insane, starting a massive massacre. He warns her that they are hopelessly outmatched because Helix allied with Casper, their powerful third-in-command. Casper is revealed to be a deadly woman wielding a massive sawsword, and since she trained the hunters, this betrayal was definitely planned way in advance. Despite the grim news, Jai Jixu smiles warmly, thanking Kay for her help. She acknowledges that if Kay hadn't swapped clothes with her to bait the pursuers, she never would have made it out alive. Kay stares in awe, totally amazed that Jai Jixu is somehow suppressing the brutal side effects of her tainted blood. She visualizes Jai's raw power as a giant, terrifying wolf absolutely chomping a dude straight out of midair. Ryan, the intelligence guy, hypes her up like a total fanboy, calling her a goddess and the only real high-level threat in their ranks. He swears that once she transforms, both of the traitors will get completely flattened. Jai Jixu deadpans, thinking it's always useful to keep a hype man around for morale. She trusts Ryan only because of a magical loyalty rune burned into his soul, the same magic that protected Max and Kay from the mirror's mind corruption. She steps out into the storm and gives an epic speech, reminding her loyal crew that they all share the tainted blood. She declares that hunting down these cruel beasts is their destiny, and there is absolutely no turning back. Max and Kay nod firmly, fully committing to the deadly mission. The squad sprints off into the heavy rain, ready to finally settle the score. Meanwhile, over at the massive church gate where the traitors are hiding out, blinding bolts of energy completely shatter the heavy wooden doors. Jai Jixu steps through the smoke looking like an absolute boss, with her squad ready to throw down. Inside, they spot Casper standing ominously with a giant scythe, completely surrounded by dead bodies. Kay charges forward with her weapon drawn, screaming at the traitor to reveal Helix's location. But Jai Jixu's enhanced instincts flare up, realizing something is totally wrong. Casper suddenly collapses backward like a puppet with its strings cut, revealing it was all a trap. Jai Jixu immediately yells for a syringe, and Max perfectly tosses it over. She quickly jams it into the decoy's neck, pumping him full of adrenaline to force him awake. The dying man's eyes snap wide open as he lets out a crazy, unhinged laugh. She grabs him by the collar, furiously demanding to know if Helix ran off with the mirror spawn. The fanatic just grins with bloody teeth, raving about how his holiness is coming. Without hesitating, she grabs the massive scythe and absolutely slices the guy in half. Furious that her main target slipped away, she punches a glass wall into pieces. Max suggests asking their house mage for help tracking him, but she immediately shuts the idea down. Instead, she points directly at Ryan and orders him to follow her. She looks up into the rain, decisively declaring that they are heading to 23rd Street. Cut to the quiet bookstore where Lin Jai casually blows on his hot coffee. He sighs, extremely bummed that he hasn't had a single customer in 3 whole days. He looks at the legal business permit Jai Jixu financed for him, still completely convinced she was just a poor victim of severe high school bullying. Suddenly, the door clicks open, and Jai Jixu walks in from the storm. He blushes and nervously greets the mysterious shopkeeper. Lin's face lights up like a kid on Christmas morning. He stands up and welcomes her enthusiastically, hoping this rich girl is about to make him a whole lot of money. But Jixu looks totally ashamed, assuming Lin is severely disappointed that she didn't utterly destroy her enemies in one clean strike. She suddenly notices a terrifying demonic gargoyle statue perched right on his counter. To her, this horrifying artifact is proof that Lin is passively flexing his unfathomable power to intimidate her. Completely humbled, she formally apologizes for letting him down. Meanwhile, outside the shop, Ryan is sweating bullets, confused as to why his badass boss brought him here. He peeks through the window and is utterly bewildered to see her chatting with a totally normal-looking dude. Inside, Jixu introduces Ryan as her loyal subordinate, but Lin just assumes the poor girl is so traumatized she needs a bodyguard to go outside. Lin pauses, replaying her apology in his head and realizing something doesn't add up. He sets his teacup down and directly asks if she failed her mission. She hangs her head and admits that her target got away, despite her pushing him back in combat. She reveals that after a brutal 5-hour battle where she completely wrecked his base, Helix realized he was outmatched and bounced, leaving her totally empty-handed. Still ashamed, Jixu bows her head and apologizes to Mr. Lin for being so careless. Lin just smiles warmly, pouring her some fresh tea and assuring her that none of it was her fault. But internally, he's sweating bullets. He sips his tea, wondering why her apology sounds like a literal life-or-death battle report instead of a simple breakup. Using some heavy mental gymnastics, he equates love to shopping and shopping to fighting, assuming she's just using aggressive business slang to describe her cheating ex. He figures that cunning bastard just found an escape route and completely ghosted her with all the money. Playing it super cool, he leans back and confidently declares that he fully understands her situation. He asks for her thoughts, completely unaware of the rat lurking right outside his window. Meanwhile, Ryan is outside secretly confirming with an informant that the legendary destructive mutant Wilda was just spotted in the city. Ryan smirks, mocking Jixu as a naive brat who completely relies on a flawed loyalty rune to keep him in check. A quick flashback shows Ryan kissing up to Jixu and her squad, totally faking his subservience. His real plan is absolutely snake-like: steal the secret to her lycanthropy control, sell out the hunters, and rise up as a king. Back in the present, Ryan watches in disbelief as Jixu begs Lin for guidance. Lin smoothly tells her not to worry, advising that her real enemy is just fear itself. Outside, Ryan scoffs. He thinks Lin is just a total fraud, spewing empty, vague nonsense like a fake martial arts guru. Suddenly, Lin excuses himself to the restroom, realizing he literally drank way too much tea. The second the boss is gone, Ryan sneaks into the shop and gets right in Jixu's face. She fiercely reprimands him for his insolent tone, but he just yells that her precious shopkeeper is a massive liar. She instantly draws her sword, threatening to slice him up for daring to insult Mr. Lin. Sweating heavily, Ryan backs down, trying to manipulate her blind trust and swearing his total loyalty. But it's a total fake-out. He swiftly draws a poisoned hidden blade to strike. Before he can even move, a horrific, unearthly screech paralyzes them both. The stone gargoyle on the counter suddenly morphs into a massive, terrifying demon. A giant clawed hand snatches Ryan out of thin air before Jixu can even blink. The beast completely engulfs the treacherous rat into its shadowy, jagged jaws. A massive, bloody tongue slithers back into the dark as Jixu stands frozen in pure shock. In an instant, the shop is dead quiet again. The gargoyle is back to being just a statue, completely spotless. Lin casually strolls back downstairs, asking where her subordinate ran off to. She stammers that he had an urgent errand. She sits down, absolutely reeling from the fact that Lin's pet just effortlessly deleted an elite hunter. She stares at the gargoyle, realizing that if it had targeted her, she would have been vaporized in a split second. Shivering, she realizes this is what coming face to face with pure death feels like. She totally misinterprets the situation, assuming Lin saw through Ryan's betrayal from the start and casually went to the bathroom just to let his monster take out the trash. She touches her pale face, terrified that she angered this godlike dark wizard by bringing garbage into his shop. Lin notices her looking pale. He tries to comfort her, joking that she shouldn't be so nervous, and asks if she thought he was going to eat her. This absolutely shatters her. She bursts into terrified tears. Flailing her hands, she apologizes profusely for Ryan's rudeness, swearing she meant no disrespect. Lin is completely lost, wondering why a simple joke made her panic even harder. He facepalms, thinking this poor girl is just so incredibly naive that she literally believes people eat each other. Deciding this customer needs a serious confidence boost, he gears up for round 2 of his top-tier therapy. He drops the jokes and offers real help. Jixu sighs in relief, asking him to recommend a book to strengthen her weak will. Lin slaps his hand on the desk, ready to deliver exactly what she needs. He reaches for a specific book, assuming her mental breakdown is just because her employee suddenly walked out on her. He casually pulls the book out, mentioning that there was definitely something sketchy about that subordinate anyway. Lin drops a massive truth bomb. Anyone who constantly brags about their absolute loyalty is usually a total snake. Jai Jixu's eyes snap wide open. She realizes Lin is exposing a massive conspiracy regarding her loyalty runes. She puts the pieces together. If Ryan's rune failed, then her father's trusted house wizard Haywood must be the true mastermind who betrayed them. Utterly crushed, she asks aloud who she can even trust in this world anymore. Lin hands her the book, telling her she can only rely on herself and that once her mind is as impenetrable as steel, no one can ever defeat her. The word steel deeply resonates with her as she reads the cover. Lin hands over the classic novel How the Steel Was Tempered, promising it will help her grow. To seal the deal, he quotes a famous line from the text, telling her that life is precious and only lived once. As she looks out into the storm with renewed, fiery resolve, he finishes the quote, telling her to live so she never regrets a single wasted moment. Out in the rain, Jai Jixu stands completely frozen, deeply moved by Lin's profound advice about finding her true calling. She looks down at the book he gave her, titled Iron Will. The second she opens it, a blinding light erupts from the pages, leaving her totally stunned. Suddenly, glowing, ethereal teardrops start raining down all around her. She drops her umbrella and stares up in sheer awe as a massive shadow looms above her head. She feels the raw magic coursing through her veins, realizing that an iron will directly amps up her soul's power. She stares at her glowing hand, her mind completely blown by the sudden surge. Meanwhile, back inside the cozy shop, Lin is casually organizing his shelves while the demonic gargoyle just chills on the counter. But outside of Lin's view, the gargoyle's stone faces start screaming, oozing sinister red smoke. Out in the alley, Jai Jixu gasps, realizing the traitor's loyalty rune on Ryan has been shattered. A terrifying crimson eye rips open in the sky, shooting dark tendrils down toward her. The gargoyle lets out a vicious roar as Ryan screams in absolute terror from the void. The shadowy wings snap back into the statue as Jai Jixu violently clutches her head in pain. Blood drips from her mouth, but she flashes a savage smirk as Ryan's severed head literally drops from the sky. She laughs, absolutely mesmerized by Mr. Lin's god-tier power. She realizes he didn't just casually bless her, he permanently transformed her soul, giving her the ultimate cheat code to break past her limits. Blushing and shivering with pure ecstasy, she admits this overwhelming power trip feels pretty amazing. She becomes convinced Lin gave her a second shot at life just to completely overhaul the Hunter organization. Falling entirely under his spell, she mentally pledges her body, soul, and absolute loyalty to his master plan. Back inside, Lin glances out the window and spots her just standing out in the downpour. He sweats nervously, wondering why she hasn't left yet and why on earth she's sporting a massive nosebleed. His brain jumps to the wildest conclusion. She got dumped and is now a total creep stalking him. He slaps his cheeks to snap out of it, reminding himself that a high-class lady wouldn't care about a normal guy like him. Suddenly, lightning flashes as a rugged, cyborg-armed knight steps up to the bookstore door holding a torn address. The grizzled veteran mutters to himself, completely baffled as to why a dangerous maniac would visit this tiny shop. Griping about carrying out justice, he stomps forward, ready to kick off a holy crusade. Inside, perfectly oblivious to the brewing storm, Lin pulls a copy of The Little Prince off the shelf. He smiles, planning to use it as a cozy bedtime story, when the front door chime suddenly rings. Lin's eyes light up, convinced that the rich lady was a lucky charm bringing him back-to-back business. He turns with his best retail smile, only to freeze when he sees the ultra-intimidating, scarred knight glaring holes into him. The knight scans the room, totally underwhelmed by the completely ordinary vibe. He senses absolutely zero magical ether from the young shopkeeper, concluding he must be a clueless civilian. But then his eyes lock onto the gargoyle and his danger sensors go absolutely haywire. He aggressively steps up to the counter, demanding to know if Lin is the owner. Trying to play it cool with this scary customer, Lin flashes a polite smile and respectfully calls him Grandpa. The knight's veins bulge, absolutely furious at the nickname, mentally wishing he could punch a hole straight through Lin's skull. Restraining his anger, the knight points a metal finger at the gargoyle and asks who it belongs to. Lin casually mentions it was a gift and isn't for sale. The knight snaps back that he's a radiant knight and would never buy dark wizard garbage. Slamming his robotic hand on the desk, the knight demands to know if the customer's name is Frank Wilda. Lin nods while the knight is completely mind-blown that Wilda handed out his real name and a top-tier magical artifact to a random civilian. Despite the knight's aggressive aura, Lin's expert people-reading skills tell him the old man isn't actually a bad guy. Channeling his inner Sherlock Holmes, Lin deduces that since the guy hasn't smashed the place up, there's only one logical explanation. He leans in and warmly asks if the knight is one of Mr. Wilda's friends. The knight's jaw practically hits the floor. Completely thrown off, the knight awkwardly stammers that they are sort of old acquaintances. Covering his tracks, he spins a lie about having a little conflict 2 years ago before Wilda completely ghosted him. Internally, the knight is seething, remembering how he literally crushed Wilda's organs into dust 2 years ago and wondering how the maggot is still breathing. Lin tears up, completely misreading the intense hatred as a deeply moving, beautiful old man friendship. He smiles brightly, assuring the knight that Wilda will be super touched by his heartfelt concern. Playing along, the knight asks if Wilda left a forwarding address so he can go visit him in person. Lin calmly pours some tea, apologizing that he doesn't have the address but promises to pass on the message, politely offering the massive knight a seat. Lin smoothly shifts gears, offering the intimidating man a good book to read instead. Knight scoffs, asking if he seriously looks that lazy. But internally, he's totally intrigued. As a supernatural being, he's used to people treating him like a ticking time bomb, so Lin's casual vibe is actually super refreshing. He gruffly agrees to sit for tea but claims he hates reading and is completely broke. Lin just smiles, sensing the haughty old man is finally opening up. Lin casually pours him a cup, letting him know reading is totally free as long as he stays in the shop. The knight stubbornly declines but suddenly winces as a massive headache splits his skull. Through his blurry vision, he spots a blood-stained book on the desk titled Son of the Abyss. Lin cheerfully mentions he was reading a warm, relaxing fairy tale, highly recommending it as the ultimate bedtime stress reliever. The grizzled veteran rolls his eyes, snapping that fairy tales are for naive little kids. But Lin insists it's an absolute masterpiece and the very last copy in the entire city, leaving the knight completely stunned. Lin holds up the little prince, proudly showing off the wholesome classic. But the knight completely misreads the situation. He assumes this fairy tale is actually the demonic Son of the Abyss text and thinks Lin is offering him forbidden lore. Pretending he's just humoring the young man, the knight aggressively reaches out to take a look. Lin smiles, thinking this grumpy grandpa is just a total softie on the inside, and hands it over. Ifwoom, the exact second he touches the cover, a massive shockwave of raw magic blasts through him. He realizes his cursed sword is violently reacting to the book's aura, wondering if this is what Lin meant by a bedtime story. The knight's eyes roll back and he collapses completely unconscious. Lin panics, reaching over the counter in shock. Sweating bullets, Lin wonders if the old man just had a random stroke or cerebral hemorrhage right in the middle of his store. He quickly rushes around the desk to give first aid and call an ambulance. He carefully checks the guy's pulse, expecting the worst, only to realize the dude is literally just taking a nap with a heartbeat stronger than a marathon runner. Lin is absolutely baffled, wondering how on earth looking at the little prince gave a grown man a literal seizure. He sighs, deciding the best move is to just let the guy sleep it off on the floor until he wakes up. Grabbing him by the shoulders, Lin tries to drag the unconscious knight out of the way. But he completely gasses out, falling backward onto his butt. Panting heavily, Lin realizes this old man weighs an absolute ton. He pictures the knight as a giant, muscular brown bear, completely flabbergasted by his sheer mass. Wishing the guy was scrawny like old Wilda, Lin apologizes to the sleeping giant for what he's about to do. Giving up on lifting him, Lin just grabs his collar and drags him across the floor like a heavy sack of potatoes. Clang, his sleeve rolls up, revealing a heavy mechanical arm. Lin stares at the complex prosthetic, realizing absolutely no normal civilian would have tech like this. He puts the pieces together, deducing that this terrifying grandpa must be a retired, high-ranking military officer. He compares the guy's intense aura to other hardened veterans he's met in the past. Lin figures his bad attitude and mental fatigue points straight to PTSD, and the metal arm is his glorious battle scar. His big brain concludes that the rain must have short-circuited the prosthetic arm, giving the poor guy a massive electric shock that knocked him out. Standing over the lifeless body in the dark, Lin suddenly realizes how incredibly sketchy this looks. He imagines himself as a deranged serial killer dragging his victim into a back room to hide the evidence. He aggressively shakes off the intrusive thoughts, assuring himself and his terrified cat that he's a perfectly normal, upstanding citizen. He notices the knight is still holding onto the book with an absolute death grip. Lin smiles softly, telling the hardened veteran to finally enjoy some sweet dreams for once. Thud, a sudden noise at the front door snaps Lin back to reality. He glances over and spots a tiny, wet paw print right at the entrance. He pops his head out into the storm and sees a black cat sprinting away down the alleyway. Lin relaxes, chuckling that it was just a stray kitty looking for shelter. He kindly yells out for the cat to hurry home and stay safe in the dangerous weather. Meanwhile, the cat is absolutely losing its mind, sprinting through the rain and cursing up a storm. It ducks into a dark corner, panting heavily before dispelling its shapeshifting magic. The cat explodes into shadowy energy, morphing back into a panicked young man. Terrified and traumatized, the guy is revealed to be an intelligence officer from the secret instrument tower named Greg. Turns out he's the ultimate Sir Joseph fanboy and only followed the legendary knight into the bookstore to keep his idol safe, never expecting things to go so horribly wrong. Outside the shop, the black cat waits out in the rain, hoping to snag an autograph from his idol, Sir Joseph. 10 minutes pass and the furry fanboy starts getting restless, wondering what's taking the legendary knight so long. He peeks through the door, only to see the massive veteran completely collapse. The cat's jaw drops, utterly terrified and wondering if the seemingly normal shopkeeper just hit him with some dark, forbidden magic. Lin casually looks down at the unconscious man and tells him to sleep well. But to the cat, it looks like this random dude just casually sent the invincible sacred flame into his eternal slumber. Paralyzed with fear, the cat realizes the shopkeeper noticed him and completely bolts down the alley. Lin calls out for him to get home safely, but the traumatized kitty thinks he just barely dodged the Grim Reaper. Convinced that Lin spared him just to send a message, the cat, revealed to be Greg from the Intelligence Bureau, runs off to report this monstrous new threat. Meanwhile, deep inside Sir Joseph's mind, the knight slowly opens his eyes, finding himself floating in a deep, underwater abyss. He recognizes it as another one of his cursed sword's illusions, but is completely stunned that the usual agonizing pain is gone. Suddenly, the glowing pages of The Little Prince materialize right in the middle of the dark void. The gentle words of the fairy tale flood into his mind, totally overwhelming his senses. But instead of driving him mad, he feels an overwhelming sense of peace. Floating up toward the towering phantom of his cursed sword, Candela, he whispers that he's happy to finally understand it. The book's magic purifies the dark energy, melting the agonizing curse away. Golden strands of light wrap around the knight, and he realizes the sentient sword is actually elated. He floats backward, completely mesmerized by the feeling. He catches a brief, glorious vision of the original elven prince who forged the blade. Joseph's mind is blown as he realizes this little kid's book just cured his incurable curse. Back in the real world, the grizzled knight's eyes snap wide open. Lin smiles warmly, welcoming the grumpy grandpa back to the land of the living. Still sitting on the floor, the battle-hardened veteran looks up and sincerely thanks him. Lin brushes it off like it's no big deal, asking how his nap was. Joseph declares he feels better than ever, while Lin internally pats himself on the back for perfectly reading the guy's ex-military vibe. Lin sweats a little, realizing this absolute unit could probably turn him into paste with one punch, and is just glad he's friends with old Wilda. Joseph formally apologizes for the trouble, but Lin smoothly replies that everyone who walks through his door is a guest he's happy to help. The shopkeeper crosses his legs, radiating a vibe of pure, neutral kindness. Hearing this, Joseph connects the dots and concludes that Lin must be an ancient elf in disguise. To Joseph, it makes total sense. Only an immortal being who has transcended good and evil would open a humble bookstore out of a pure respect for wisdom. He thinks back to the legend of Candela, the ancient elven prince. Driven mad by a plague, Candela took his own life, fusing his tortured soul into his blade. Ever since, anyone who wielded the sword was doomed to go completely insane and perish. Joseph fully expected to die from the curse soon, but this random little book completely pacified the evil weapon. Staring in awe, he becomes convinced Lin is a god-tier monster who burned away his own magical aura to live forever among humans. He humbly asks to borrow the book, and Lin chuckles internally, thinking the grumpy old man is just acting like a massive tsundere. Lin shifts into his patented therapy mode, telling Joseph that his guilt and self-hatred are driving him crazy. He hits the knight with a heavy truth. It wasn't his suffering that defeated him, but his own kindness that made him weak. Joseph's mind is absolutely blown. He remembers past sword wielders who died full of regrets and wonders if being kind is actually a flaw. Lin clarifies that kindness is great, but carrying the weight of the world makes a person's defenses incredibly fragile. He advises the knight that it's okay to back off and just be an ordinary person sometimes, absolutely nailing the veteran therapy session. Joseph treats these words like gospel, realizing the curse didn't drive people mad, it was their own toxic pursuit of perfection. He nervously asks if this calming effect will last forever. Lin smirks like a true salesman, guaranteeing lasting results as long as Joseph keeps coming back for his therapy. Joseph is utterly shook, assuming Lin is casually offering to absorb the maddening curse of Candela himself. He feels incredibly humbled, thinking this ancient being is low-key mocking his undefeated Holy Flame title to teach him a lesson. The old knight looks down at his robotic hand, realizing this legendary cursed sword might have finally found its true master. Meanwhile, Lin is just happy to lock in another loyal customer, convinced the old man is just a massive softie deep down. Flashing a confident smile, Lin calls himself a professional life coach and generously gifts the knight the book, completely unaware of the absolute mythological misunderstanding happening right in front of him. Lin smoothly shifts into life coach mode, telling the grizzled knight he's shouldered way too many burdens and deserves a break. Joseph is absolutely blinded by an imaginary holy light, viewing Lin as the ultimate selfless hero. He's completely convinced that only an ancient, immortal being could reach this god-tier level of pure kindness. But Joseph just smiles, firmly declaring he doesn't need rest until the world is finally at peace. He asks to borrow the fairy tale to clear his head, promising to return in exactly 7 days. Lin smirks, thinking the old man's excessive sense of justice is what's stressing him out, and happily secures a new regular. Joseph signs the borrowing card for the little prince, still reeling from the fact this is an actual, functioning bookstore. Lin flashes a warm smile, telling him he'll see him next week. Stepping back out into the rain, Joseph feels completely reborn, his cursed aura totally suppressed, and vows to eventually end Wilda's life. He looks up into the storm, declaring this crusade is his absolute responsibility. Meanwhile, in a dark hideout, Frank Wilda is using sinister green magic to decipher his new text. Wilder is completely mind-blown, calling Lin's book a bottomless ocean of forbidden knowledge. He laughs like an absolute maniac, claiming his brain is literally trembling with excitement. Reading over a highly complex and horrifying sacrificial ritual, he praises the absolute genius of the work. He decides it's finally time for the black-scaled, faceless man to make his terrifying return. Realizing the devil's language was just the warm-up, he prepares to dive into the horrifying lore of a lost civilization. Fascinated by Mr. Lin's godlike intellect, Wilder reveals he's prepared a very special gift to show his gratitude. Cut to the secret instrument tower where an agent named Claude is screaming at the catboy Greg for fainting just by looking at the shopkeeper. Claude paces nervously, terrified that if even his legendary teacher couldn't handle the target, sending backup would be a total massacre. Suddenly, his phone rings with an urgent update from the surveillance team. Claude absolutely panics when he hears his teacher is walking out of the shop. He looks down at his vibrating phone and sees the caller ID reads Fossil. Claude frantically answers, standing at attention and waiting for Sir Joseph's direct orders. Joseph immediately commands him to pull all investigators off 23rd Street and instantly reclassify the bookstore. He orders it to be marked as a Class I area, absolutely top secret. Claude is shook knowing Class I stands for indescribable, the highest, most terrifying threat level possible. Sweating bullets, Claude asks what the heck is going on with this mysterious shopkeeper. Out in the rain, Joseph glares down at the two shivering spy cats hiding in the alley. He asks Claude if someone is listening in, and Claude nervously stammers a yes. Without hesitating, Claude absolutely smacks the catboy across the room to keep the intel strictly classified. Joseph yells at Claude to shut up and do his job, threatening to banish him to the mountains to farm potatoes. Claude frantically agrees and hangs up, actually relieved that his master is yelling, since it means he hasn't lost his mind to the curse. He smiles knowing that beneath the sharp tongue, the radiant knight is still as soft-hearted as ever. Claude relays the orders to his team, telling them to lock down the new file for the elders. He mutters to himself that a blank Class I file is ready for Joseph to fill out when he returns. Right on cue, Joseph kicks the door open, scaring the absolute daylight out of Claude. The towering knight marches in and coldly orders Claude to wipe the memory of whoever was listening in. The poor catboy gets hit with a forget rune, his eyes swirling like a dizzy cartoon character. Claude introduces the dazed kid as Greg, mentioning he's a hardcore Joseph fanboy who drops millions on his fan clubs. Joseph sits down at his computer, completely unbothered by his wealthy stalker. He starts clacking away at the keyboard with his heavy mechanical arm. Hearing that Greg comes from a loaded mage family, Joseph gets a brilliantly wicked idea. He decides to take the kid in as a fake apprentice just to directly drain his bank account. Claude is absolutely floored, wondering how the most righteous holy knight alive can be this shamelessly greedy. Joseph just laughs like a supervillain, thrilled that he's saving money on a full memory wipe. He types up the classified file, listing the bookstore's danger level as friendly, but noting the books hold immense, mysterious power. He smirks, figuring this ominous warning will definitely keep the idiots away. Later that night, Joseph is chilling in a pair of pink bunny pajamas, screaming into an old-school telephone at someone who thought he died. He slams the phone down, pleasantly surprised that his cursed sword isn't feeding off his anger for once. But the absolute second he sits down to read his fairy tale, the phone rings again and he completely loses his mind, screaming about labor laws and emotional damage. Back at Joseph's house, the veteran peeks into his daughter Melissa's room, reminding her to drink her milk. Melissa groans, complaining that she's a high-ranking combat knight captain, not a little kid anymore. Joseph playfully teases that he just wants her to grow a little taller so she can actually find a husband, causing her to totally spit take. Annoyed, she mutters about her muscle-brained dad, but suddenly notices a strange book left on her table. Curious as to why her illiterate father would be reading, she reaches for the mysterious tome. He casually flips it open, expecting some boring manual. Instantly, a massive cosmic vision reflects in her eyes, completely blowing her mind. She suddenly remembers her dad absolutely raging at his subordinates earlier. He had furiously warned them not to mess with the terrifying shopkeeper who incapacitated him without breaking a sweat. Melissa violently slams the book shut, startled right out of her trance. Joseph casually walks back in, making her practically jump out of her skin. He calls her name, totally confused by her panicked reaction. He hands her the glass of milk, completely oblivious to the cosmic trip she just experienced. She forces a super awkward smile, trying to act completely normal while hiding the cursed book behind her back. Joseph shuts the door behind him, leaving her alone again. He sighs, chalking up her weird behavior to just another rebellious teenage phase. He glances fondly at an old family photo, while inside, Melissa is quietly freaking out about how insanely realistic the stories in the book were. She throws a massive tantrum on her bed, furious that her dad interrupted her right at the absolute best part. Calming down, she realizes she completely underestimated her dad's reading material, remembering he mentioned it came from a highly classified bookstore. Her curiosity piques and she smirks, deciding to investigate this suspicious shop herself. She activates a glowing magical key, using her late mother's high-level security clearance to hack into the system. Accessing the massive holographic database, she thanks her mom and vows to become an excellent knight. She easily pinpoints the bookstore's location, totally unfazed that its danger level is just listed as friendly. Determined to go, she firmly grabs her glass of milk. She chugs the whole thing down, desperately hoping she actually gets a growth spurt before her mission. Meanwhile, the city is getting absolutely dumped on by a torrential red alert rainstorm that threatens to flood everything. Inside the bookstore, Lin Jai is furiously mopping up water that completely soaked his first floor. He groans, thinking that if it rains any harder, he's literally going to need a boat just to survive. He wipes his forehead, totally exhausted and annoyed by the severe lack of customers. He complains that he almost packed up the shop when he saw the massive puddle, but luckily his precious books survived the mess. Standing back, he admires his handiwork, super proud that the floor is back to being shiny and spotless. He flips his sign to open and stares out the window, hoping that little stray cat found its way home safely. Meanwhile, the cat agent Greg is having a total fanboy meltdown, crying tears of joy because he finally gets to see his idol Joseph's office in person. Back at the bookstore, Lin sighs heavily into the stormy night. Next door, his chubby neighbor is throwing an absolute fit because his TV died right in the middle of his show. The guy quickly figures out the power breaker tripped, but he is completely terrified of stepping out into the insane storm. Suddenly, he gets a bright idea. He decides to guilt-trip his good guy neighbor Lin into fixing it for him. He knocks on the wall, calling out to see if Lin is around. Lin answers, and the neighbor shamelessly asks if Lin can brave the storm to check the fuse box for him. Always the gentleman, Lin completely agrees and heads toward his back door without a second thought. Suddenly, Lin senses a strange, creeping presence behind him. He turns around to see a terrifying, shadowy blob with glowing red eyes staring right at him. Instead of freaking out, Lin casually calls the demon Inkai, asking if the little guy wants to help him with his chores. The terrifying shadow monster cheerfully nods and Lin just smiles, thinking his spooky pet is being super polite and helpful. Not wanting to hurt the cosmic horror's feelings, Lin steps aside and lets it handle the dirty work. The eldritch abomination slithers out into the pouring rain, extending its shadowy tentacles straight toward the fuse box. Clack, it flips the breaker with ease as the neighbor's TV magically flickers back to life. The chubby neighbor laughs happily, totally oblivious, and shamelessly yells that he'll ask Lin for help next time too. The shadowy mass splatters back inside, while Lin casually yells back a polite, "You're welcome." The neighbor sits back down with his popcorn but suddenly freezes as an ominous buzzing noise starts echoing from his screen. The terrified man sweats bullets, staring ahead in absolute horror. He sits frozen in his chair while two creepy glowing eyes stare right back at him from a static TV. Outside in the pouring rain, a blood-curdling scream echoes from the dark building. Meanwhile, Lin chills at the desk of his cozy bookstore, looking completely unbothered. He casually hopes his recent good deeds will finally bring some business his way. Right on cue, the shop bell rings and Lin eagerly welcomes his new guest. He's pleasantly surprised that his karma paid out so fast. Old Wilda steps out of the storm, rocking a scary beast mask and a classy trench coat. Lin greets his old buddy with a smile, happy to see him back so soon. He silently judges Wilda's choice of facewear, but admits the man has serious drip. Wilder respectfully bows, stating he braved the awful weather just to express his gratitude. Lin humbly tells him to chill out with the expensive items, saying he's already happy with the last gift. But Wilder is practically fanboying internally, thinking his previous gift was absolute trash compared to what he brought today. He reveals that Lin's previous help pushed him to the very edge of an insane power-up. Wilder insists Lin takes this new item, claiming it might serve him well. Lin plays it cool, asking to see this legendary project that took 2 years to make. Wilder proudly pulls out an intricate, handcrafted dreamcatcher. Lin is instantly hit with nostalgia, remembering a folk culture event from his old world. He casually flexes his knowledge about Native American culture and how dreamcatchers filter out nightmares. He reflects on the spiritual lore behind the item, genuinely surprised to see one in this world. Wilder is absolutely blown away by Lin's vast wisdom. Internally, Wilder notes that the real treasure isn't the physical net, but the ultra-powerful dreams trapped inside it. Lin, completely clueless to the magic, is just hyped because the stormy weather has been ruining his sleep. Wilder humbly bows out, deeply honored to provide exactly what the boss needed. As he leaves, Wilder thinks about how the trapped dream would obliterate a normal person's soul, but assumes Lin will just treat it like a midnight snack. Suddenly, we cut to a massive explosion blowing up a city building. A sharp weapon attached to a chain whips through the chaotic air. A fierce beast woman falls from the blast but lands smoothly on her teammate's giant buster sword. A blindfolded brawler warns her about enemy mages locking onto their position. Down below, a white-robed cultist fires off a glowing spell. A gigantic magical snake materializes out of nowhere. It lunges at an elf girl, slamming her hard against a sloped rooftop. But she refuses to go down easily, viciously sinking her fangs straight into the giant reptile's snout. Out of nowhere, the beast woman transforms into a hulking white werewolf and absolutely wrecks the snake. The mages are shook, realizing she has a fully controllable transformation. Desperate, they order a fire attack despite the torrential rain, while the massive wolf lets out a deafening roar. The wolfwoman scoffs, telling the cultists they're just digging their own graves. Her allies look up at her in total awe. They realize this insane power is exactly what they've been dreaming of to change their world. And they know the mysterious resident of 23rd Street, Lin, is the one pulling the strings behind it all. The brawler tells them not to overthink the boss's master plan. He says their only job is to follow orders and reap the rewards later. The wolfwoman smirks, fully agreeing as she prepares to jump back into the fray. Meanwhile, the mages desperately channel a massive living fire spell. A blinding torrent of flames blasts through the rain straight at the hunters. The crew braces themselves for the intense heat heading right for them. The fire hits with a massive explosion, lighting up the rainy night like the 4th of July. Cut back to Lin, safely inside his warm shop, casually walking upstairs and complaining about the weather. He steps into his dark bedroom, completely oblivious to the magical war zone happening just outside. He simply grabs a hammer and hangs his deadly new dreamcatcher on the wall, smiling like he just scored some aesthetic room decor. Lin yawns and gets into bed, hoping his brand new dreamcatcher actually works. Suddenly, he wakes up standing in a mysterious void, wondering if he's dreaming. He walks barefoot across a white landscape, noticing it looks like ash but feels surprisingly warm to the touch. He casually shrugs, figuring dream logic doesn't have to make sense anyway. He looks around, taking in the breathtaking view of the snowy, flower-covered wilderness. He is completely mesmerized by the spectacular scenery. Up ahead, he spots a massive, twisted tree that looks like something straight out of a fantasy novel. And resting right at the base, a drop-dead gorgeous elf lady fast asleep. Lin stares at her peaceful face, suddenly feeling a strange, familiar melody echo in his heart. He gets a fleeting, magical vision of her being crowned as the ruler of this frozen realm. The sheer beauty of the moment leaves him completely speechless. Feeling like he stepped into a fairy tale, he reaches out to touch a nearby glowing flower. The petals feel incredibly real, complete with a crisp, refreshing scent. He quickly realizes he's experiencing a lucid dream, keeping all his senses and memories perfectly intact. Playing the intellectual, he assumes old Wilda's stories just planted a strong psychological suggestion in his brain. Since it's his dream, his mind immediately goes to some cheeky ideas, before he awkwardly coughs and tells himself to chill out. He wonders why his subconscious would conjure up such a detailed, unfamiliar beauty, jokingly blaming it on his personal tastes. But he brushes it off, fully embracing the wild freedom of the dream world. He slowly approaches the sleeping elf through the sea of glowing flowers. Getting a closer look, his heart starts racing at her flawless, goddess-like features. Deciding to let loose just a bit, he flashes a mischievous grin. He gently places the flower in her silver hair as a little token of admiration. Feeling bold, he reaches out to gently poke her cheek, figuring she won't wake up anyway. But swoosh, the elf suddenly rises from the flowers, catching him completely off guard. She stands tall, her elegant dress materializing with glowing crystal patterns. Lin absolutely sweats bullets, realizing this dream girl is easily over 6 feet tall and intimidating as heck. He stares down at him and calmly asks who he is. Lin is fascinated that his own subconscious is talking back, proudly introducing himself as a dreamer. The elf smiles and touches her cheek, casually agreeing since they are obviously inside a dream. Lin is super impressed by how mysterious and self-aware his dream projection is. Feeling confident, he points right back at her, demanding she reveal her identity too. He feels pretty clever, but she just gives a sweet smile and calls herself Silver. Lin is slightly disappointed, asking if she's really only going to give him a name. Silver playfully winks, throwing his own logic right back in his face by saying at least her answer was true. Lin is totally flustered by the counterattack, realizing her smile is dangerously charming. Silver's expression then softens, and she admits she's been trapped here for an eternity. She gazes out over the landscape, noting that despite its beauty, the silence is absolutely deafening. He looks to Lin, genuinely asking why she feels this way. Shibai Lin instantly diagnoses her with a severe case of loneliness. But then the businessman inside him wakes up. Can he actually expand his life coach hustle into the dream world? He looks at the fairy tale setting and the elegant elf, thinking this is the ultimate setup for his services. He gets super pumped, ready to do what he does best, dropping top-tier life advice. But first, he realizes his pajamas are completely killing his professional vibe. Tapping into his lucid dreaming powers, he flexes his imagination and instantly spawns his signature black suit. Now looking sharp and back in his element, he flashes a warm smile, extending a hand to ask if she'd like to take a seat. Silver looks down at his hand, quietly surprised by the polite gesture. As she takes it, Lin notes her touch is freezing but gentle, fully ready to dive into her problems. They sit together among the glowing irises, and Lin asks if she's really been all alone this entire time. Silver locks eyes with him, dropping a massive bombshell. No one has ever entered this realm before, except for him. Lin realizes this beautiful elf is basically a magical Rapunzel, trapped inside her own mind. He feels bad that her whole existence is just resting eternally in this solitary, frozen garden. He sighs, bummed that it's only a dream and he can't actually save her in real life. Slipping into his life coach persona, he tells her that her true issue is just plain old loneliness. He explains that endless pondering without any new experiences is a straight-up recipe for pain. Silver totally agrees, admitting that people only ever isolate her out of pure fear. Lin is impressed by her deep thoughts, realizing she's quite the philosopher. So he decides to match her energy, dropping the classic quote, "Man thinks, God laughs." But he spins it with serious riz, saying God wouldn't laugh mockingly at a thinker as gorgeous as her. Instead, it would be a warm smile, a secret, romantic understanding between her and the divine. He flashes a charming grin, asking if his little theory isn't the most romantic thing she's ever heard. Silver is slightly flustered, calling him out for being a total romanticist, which he proudly owns up to. Lin smoothly adds that their shared mindset is probably why they managed to connect in this dream space. She agrees, humbly suggesting that entering her dream means he might be an even greater thinker than her. Absolutely gigaflattered by the praise, Lin seizes the moment and asks her for a massive favor. Silver looks completely caught off guard, hesitantly telling him to go on. Without missing a beat, he grabs her hands and boldly asks her to be his friend. It's a 200 IQ play. He knows isolated people usually reject others, so he phrases it in a way she literally can't refuse. She's stunned by the word friend, but he explains that sharing stories is way better than rotting alone in a boring garden. Suddenly, his inner salesman wakes up, realizing this is the perfect opportunity to plug his bookstore. Using his lucid dreaming powers, he snaps his fingers and literally spawns a book out of thin air. He casually hands over a copy of Grimm's fairy tales, offering it as a first meeting gift. Silver gently takes the book, completely speechless. She gets emotional, admitting it's been an eternity since anyone gave her a gift or even bothered to talk to her. Feeling bad that she has nothing to offer, she tells him to take a flower, honey, or fruit from her tree in return. Lin is shocked to notice the massive tree is actually packed with glowing, golden fruits. First, he politely declines, thinking dream food is absolutely useless. But then his inner loot goblin kicks in, and he decides he needs a rare item from this once-in-a-lifetime run. He asks if the golden fruits are safe to eat raw. Silver gives him a warm smile, confirming they definitely are. He plucks one down, marveling at how insanely detailed this dream apple looks. Curious, he takes a big bite to test the dream physics. He's genuinely surprised. It's crispy, sweet, has no core, and tastes exactly like a real apple. Silver leans in closely, eagerly asking if he likes her gift. He happily tells her it's super sweet, but suddenly his vision starts glitching out. The entire dream dimension begins cracking like shattered glass, signaling he's waking up way too soon. His hand starts turning to static, and he realizes he's out of time. Reluctantly, he tells his new friend that he has to go. As the fantasy world collapses into a void, he pulls her in close for a heartfelt goodbye. He gently kisses her cheek, leaving her completely stunned. Before fading completely, he whispers a promise to return. He hopes they can meet again the next time he closes his eyes. Silver is left floating alone in the glitching void, clutching his book as the dream ends. Meanwhile, back in the real world, a heavily scarred man smokes in a dark, rainy alleyway, regretting his recent life choices. He admits to a shadowy figure that he's basically out of options after betraying his teacher and taking out a student. The boss in the shadows questions why a badly injured guy like him is needed for this specific mission. The scarred man explains that their targets have received insane power-ups, making them completely unstoppable. He reveals that both targets are connected to a mysterious bookstore on 23rd Street, seemingly having their entire fates rewritten by the owner. Realizing the danger, the boss orders him to investigate this overpowered shopkeeper immediately. He demands the scarred man gather intel on the owner's power level and the store's layout, setting the stage for a deadly confrontation. The scarred boss takes a drag of his cigarette, ordering his subordinate to bring back some good news. The mysterious assassin silently nods, blending perfectly into the rainy night. Standing outside, the assassin scoffs at the rumors that some faceless freak actually got stronger after visiting this place. He hopes the scary intel is completely wrong. He stares down their target, the infamous bookstore at number 412 on 23rd Street. Slipping out of the shadows, he smirks, noting the place matches the description perfectly. He slithers through the dark hallways, but senses absolutely zero magical energy. From a sensory perspective, it just feels like a totally ordinary, boring bookshop. He creeps up to the second floor, wondering if the higher-ups are just incredibly paranoid. Gripping the doorknob, he decides to just assassinate the owner right now and be done with it. Opening the door, he spots the glowing dream catcher hanging over the sleeping Lin. He thinks it's absolutely hilarious that everyone was terrified of this random sleeping dude. But suddenly, his body rigidly arches backward as an invisible force hits him. He stumbles away from the stairs, completely losing his marbles as he hallucinates a massive, creepy eyeball rolling across the floor. Collapsing to his knees, he starts aggressively ripping at his own face. His sanity completely shatters, and he maniacally declares himself a servant eager to serve his new lord. Meanwhile, back outside, the scarred boss checks his watch, annoyed that it's been half an hour. He figures his guy is just taking his sweet time on a simple recon mission. He's super confident in his assassin, boasting that the guy can turn into a shadow and escape any sticky situation. He lights another smoke, thinking he might have to finish the job himself if things go sideways. But suddenly he realizes his cigarette is out, yet a massive shadow is still looming over him in the pitch-black alley. Without hesitating, he tosses his cigarette box and screams out a fire spell. A massive explosion lights up the street like a Michael Bay movie. The boss flips backward to dodge, realizing the heavy rain is severely nerfing his flames. The shadow monster steps out of the smoke, completely unrecognizable from the man he sent in. A massive black tentacle whips out, absolutely decking the boss and sending him flying. The boss hits the ground hard and retaliates with a massive wall of fire. But it's no use, his leg gets cleanly sliced off, melting into a gross puddle of black goo. Sweating bullets, the boss desperately claims he knows all about betrayals and prepared for this exact moment. He unleashes a concentrated fire blast, thinking he finally roasted the traitor. But the flames just get sucked into the shadow, leaving him completely shook. He stares up in absolute horror, realizing this thing isn't his subordinate anymore. He screams in pure terror as the monster towers over him. The creature reveals its true, terrifying skeletal form, its eyes glowing an ominous red. The boss realizes this isn't a betrayal, it's a brutal warning straight from the bookstore owner himself. Cut to the Scarlet Cult's headquarters, where a masked lackey urgently knocks on the leader's door. The leader turns around, shocked to hear that his scarred subordinate is already dead. The lackey hands over a terrifying forensic report from the crime scene. The photos show the boss's mangled corpse with the word "run" desperately written in his own blood. The leader reads the files, realizing the assassin's mind was hijacked by an entity the cult's best mages can't even comprehend. Sweating slightly, he orders his men to abandon the bookstore investigation and team up with the White Wolf immediately. The lackey nods and scurries off to relay the new orders. The leader stares out the window, completely taken aback by the bookstore owner's absolute ruthlessness. He walks over to a high-tech incubation tank, stating they are at a critical stage for hatching the magic mirror spawn. Clenching his fist, he vows that he won't let anyone, especially that crazy bookstore owner, ruin his master plan. The next morning, Lin peacefully wakes up in his cozy bed, completely oblivious to the bloodbath he caused. He stretches with a huge smile, deciding he really needs to thank old Wilda for such a fantastic gift. He gets dressed, hoping to see his beautiful dream elf again when he goes back to sleep. Grabbing his toothbrush, he casually heads over to the bathroom sink. But when he opens his mouth in front of the mirror, he freezes, realizing something is seriously wrong. Lin inspects his mouth in the mirror, completely baffled that he suddenly sprouted 8 extra teeth. He casually wonders if his pet gargoyle blessed him with Buddha's dental plan, then just shrugs it off as normal weirdness. He happily throws open the doors to his shop, eager to welcome some new customers. But he notices the street is dead silent. Normally, his neighbor Mr. Colin blasts the morning news at max volume. He wonders if the poor guy blew a fuse again or came down with a nasty cold. Lin heads next door and knocks, accidentally giving Colin a massive jump scare. Lin politely asks if something is wrong. Meanwhile, Colin is sweating buckets, convinced he's about to get murdered like a nosy extra in a horror movie. Panicking, Colin frantically grabs the remote and clicks the TV on. The news reports a fatal wall collapse nearby. Lin assumes Colin is just spooked by the bad weather and tells him to take care of his health. But Colin's brain is running a marathon, interpreting Lin's friendly advice as a straight-up death threat. He stares at his phone, deeply regretting the message he just sent out. Lin calls his name again, making Colin absolutely lose his mind. His phone screen reveals he just sent an urgent request to a local priest for a full-blown exorcism. Believing his cover is totally blown, Colin drops to his knees in despair. He starts ugly crying, clasping his hands and begging for his life to be spared. Lin is super confused but politely backs off, telling the panting man to just get some rest. Realizing he's making things awkward, Lin decides to leave him alone. Walking back, Lin feels like his neighbor is definitely hiding something and considers buying him a peace offering. Just then, his shop bell chimes. He turns around with a warm smile, ready to greet his first customer of the day. A young, energetic girl with braided red hair steps out of the pouring rain. She glares around the room, internally wondering if this dusty little shop is really the legendary place her father warned her about. He stares at Lin with an intense, skeptical gaze. Lin smoothly offers his services, asking if there's anything specific she needs. He stays completely silent, judging the atmosphere. Her intense stare breaks as she realizes the place feels incredibly basic. She walks toward the desk, completely unimpressed and doubting the store's high-class rating. She leans over the counter, sizing Lin up and asking if he's the actual owner. He politely confirms, offering to let her borrow, buy, or just browse. She crosses her arms, thinking he doesn't look like much of a threat. Annoyed that she braved the storm and risked her father's wrath for a boring bookstore, she puffs her cheeks. Deciding to have a little fun, she flashes a cheeky smirk. She asks if she can really have anything she wants. Lin's brain does a double take, wondering what the youth are up to these days. He cautiously agrees, as long as her demands aren't too outrageous. Without missing a beat, she slams her hand on the desk and challenges him to an arm wrestling match. Lin's brain completely short-circuits at the ridiculous request. Putting on his detective hat, he quickly analyzes her. Her shoes are clean from the puddles, she has good manners and comes from money. He notes she looked disappointed earlier, meaning she came here with a specific goal. He mentally scrolls through his recent VIP customers, wondering who could have sent her. Then it clicks: the fiery eyes, the stubborn attitude. She looks exactly like his scarred, hulking customer, Joseph. He realizes she must be Joseph's blood relative. Unknowingly, Lin's sheer focus radiates a terrifying magical pressure. The girl instantly folds under the invisible weight, dropping into a chair completely shook. Sweating nervously, she stammers, asking if a simple arm wrestling match is really that offensive. Realizing he stared way too long, Lin drops the intimidating aura with an awkward laugh. He agrees to the match but says he needs 2 questions answered first. He nervously asks what he wants to know. Lin drops the bomb. He asks if she's here because of Joseph. He practically jumps out of her skin in shock. She totally panics, demanding to know how he figured out her secret identity. Lin calmly pours her a cup of tea, noting that they look practically identical with that same fiery, rebellious pride. He casually sips his tea and hits her with question 2, why arm wrestling? She awkwardly sips her drink and drops her dad's wild philosophy. Joseph taught her that if you're annoyed but legally restricted from starting a fight, you just force them to arm wrestle. If they refuse, they look weak, and if they get mad and throw a punch, you finally have the perfect excuse to absolutely wreck them. Lin is left utterly speechless by this pure meathead logic. Lin facepalms, realizing Joseph's military parenting style is an absolute disaster. But he agrees to play along, letting her choose the rules, and she eagerly suggests a best 2 out of 3 match. Assuming she just wants to vent her daddy issues on him, Lin decides he needs to teach this brat a lesson in manners. They lock hands. The girl instantly feels his totally normal grip and decides to go easy so she doesn't accidentally snap the supposed big shot's wrist. She counts down, and the second she hits one, she slams his hand straight into the table. She completely freezes, absolutely stunned by how easily he folded. Lin casually rubs his wrist, acting like he put up a solid fight. Her brain short-circuits. She could bench press 10 adults at age 6, so why did this legendary boss go down like a sack of potatoes? She realizes he totally let her win and is just mocking her. Her knight's pride flares up, refusing to accept a pity victory. With a terrifying aura, she slams her hands on the desk and demands a rematch, looking like she's about to eat him alive. They lock hands again, the tension in the room skyrocketing. Countdown hits 0 and the rematch officially begins. The girl strains with every ounce of her superhuman strength, her face turning completely red. Her hands stay perfectly locked in the middle. Lin just chuckles, finding her desperate struggle kind of adorable. Then, without breaking a sweat, he absolutely wrecks her, slamming her hand down with a loud crack. He slumps over the desk, her spirit completely shattered. Tears well up in her eyes as she dramatically accepts her total defeat. Lin tries to play the nice guy, asking why winning a simple game matters so much to her. He flicks her forehead, warning her that picking the wrong fight in the real world will get her killed. She immediately whines about him being a meanie. Satisfied that he just prevented a future delinquent, Lin finally asks why she actually came to his shop. She sheepishly admits she just wanted to borrow a book, instantly turning Lin's eyes into giant dollar signs. She explains she wants to borrow the same book her dad took so she can read the ending before he catches her. Lin realizes the little prince must be causing some serious family drama, so he suggests she just talk things out with Joseph first. But she insists her dad would go ballistic if he caught her reading it and would never share it. Lin confidently smiles, assuring her that a little understanding goes a long way. She snaps, yelling that her dad has never understood her in his entire life. She vents about his constant nagging, harsh scolding, and how nothing she ever achieves is good enough for him. Lin nods along, piecing together the true root of her problems. He grabs some massive books from the shelf, telling her it's time to truly impress her old man. Assuming her academics are tanking because of her strict dad, Lin pulls out the ultimate weapon, a massive higher ed math mock exam workbook. Lin grins like an absolute supervillain, fully believing that intense math homework cures all teenage rebellion. He slams a giant stack of science and math textbooks on the desk, leaving the poor girl utterly confused. He promises these books are the key to impressing Joseph, though she heavily doubts it. She remembers her brutal childhood training, where every hard-earned achievement was just brushed off as the bare minimum. She recalls Joseph constantly comparing her to his younger, vastly superior self. But Lin reassures her that underneath all the tough love, her dad just wants to see her grow and succeed. She is completely captivated by Lin's words, mistaking these mundane math workbooks for legendary mana control manuals. Lin leans in, dramatically declaring that if she desires true power and can endure the pain, these books will unlock the door. The second she touches the stack, a blinding golden light erupts from the desk. She is suddenly transported into a magical void, with Lin's voice echoing that this is the ultimate price she must pay. He tells her the future version of herself will thank her for enduring this trial. Her entire being seemingly deconstructs and reforms as she absorbs this newfound universal knowledge. The blinding light fades, snapping her back to reality inside the quiet bookstore. She gasps for air, wondering if she literally just died and had her soul rebuilt from scratch. She realizes she has been gifted the cornerstone of all creation, a god-tier power that instantly shatters every single bottleneck in her night training. She trembles in absolute fear, realizing this bookstore owner casually rewrote her entire existence without breaking a sweat. She stares at him like he's an all-powerful demon. Meanwhile, Lin just thinks he successfully gave her math-induced PTSD. Unaware of her terror, Lin leans in closely, offering to help her with her studies. He places a hand on her shoulder, ready to answer her questions, while she sits there absolutely petrified by his demonic intentions. Jai Jixu is completely terrified, assuming this help is just a twisted way for him to play with her like a toy. Meanwhile, Lin is just grinning, planning to hit her with even more brutal mock exams if she fails the first batch. Satisfied with his master plan, Lin decides to give her a little encouragement, figuring she just wants some praise. He kindly tells her she's a gifted kid who deserves a better future, but in her panicked mind, he looks like a terrifying shadow monster whispering sweet, demonic promises. He tells her she can make her father proud, which finally convinces her she has no choice but to accept her fate and take the cursed books. She aggressively bows at a perfect 90-degree angle, yelling that she's not afraid and apologizing for her earlier disrespect. Lin is pleasantly surprised by her dramatic attitude flip, entirely crediting the magical disciplining power of math homework. He charges her a clean $100 for the knowledge. She walks out of the shop into the pouring rain, looking completely hollowed out. Staring back at the building, she slowly realizes she completely forgot her original goal and just bought a bunch of random books instead. She sighs, brushing off the weird encounter, and hurries home under her umbrella. Suddenly, the scene shifts to a vast body of water where explosive magical blasts are narrowly missing someone on the run. A short-haired elf girl violently gasps for air as she wakes up, realizing her double teleportation spell actually saved her life. She sits up in a rustic wooden bed, clutching a nasty side wound and wondering what happened to her teammates. Before she can panic too much, someone walks into the room. It's a stunning, tall blonde elf wearing a casual apron, leaving the injured girl completely shook to see another of her kind. Cut to the dark, creepy headquarters of the Scarlet Cult. A lackey reports that the abnormal hunter, Hound Barker, has officially gone missing. The cult leader, looking super stressed, demands to know what the rest of their forces are saying. The lackey stutters that nobody knows anything, which earns him a brutal, magical force choke from his boss. The leader completely loses his cool, screaming at the poor guy for being utterly useless. He curses the cult, furious that all tracks were wiped clean, leaving 0 forensic clues behind. With crazed eyes, he orders the lackey to continue the investigation no matter how many bodies drop. Calming down slightly, he asks about the condition of someone named Charles. The lackey gasps for air and confirms Charles is finally awake, having had his corpse perfectly preserved and revived with newly injected memories. The leader flashes a sinister grin, thrilled to finally get a rare W. He reveals that Charles is actually old Wilda's favorite disciple, making him the perfect bait to lure the legendary Black Mage into a death trap. Meanwhile, a mysterious cloaked figure trudges through the snowy mountains, hoping to gather enough energy to hatch the cult's ultimate weapon. The figure approaches a colossal, frozen dinosaur skull carved into the icy cliff. He drops to one knee and calls out to his teacher, the ancient giant king. Throwing back his hood, a much younger old Wilda declares his name, demanding an audience. He screams for his master to bless him with power and witness his ultimate masterpiece. Gripping his staff, Wilda prepares for his grand presentation. The giant's booming voice echoes from the frozen fossil, crackling with insane pink magical energy. Wilda absolutely slams his prized creation, a terrifying stone gargoyle, right onto the icy ground. The gargoyle violently bursts with dark magic as the giant king manifests in a terrifying, spectral form. The mountain literally rumbles as the giant peers down at the tiny mage. The skeletal king acknowledges his pupil, inspecting the gargoyle offering. Young Wilda eagerly presents the demonic statue, hoping it's enough to prove his worth. The giant king casts a massive, multi-layered magical scan over the artifact. His giant glowing eye widens in absolute shock at the sheer quality of the work. Impressed, he reaches down with a colossal skeletal hand, transferring raw, crackling purple energy straight into Wilda. Wilda braces himself as the magical power surges through his veins, realizing it's absolutely perfect. The giant king officially declares that destiny has chosen him. With a booming voice, he announces that his pupil has finally graduated. Wilda looks up in awe, overwhelmed by the realization. He drops to his knees, deeply honored as the giant king officially dubs him an independent black mage. The spectral king fades into the snow, wishing his final pupil good luck on his dark destiny. Older Wilda narrates over the flashback, admitting that back then, he was just a happy, naive kid hyped about getting his master's approval. We see young Wilda strutting through the rainy streets in a sleek trench coat and top hat, serving pure villain drip. Older Wilda reflects that it was exactly this cocky, youthful arrogance that led to his ultimate downfall. His younger self arrives at a gloomy brick orphanage in the dead of night. He grips the handle, slowly creaking the door open to begin his dark legacy. The flashback continues as young Wilda steps into a gloomy orphanage, led by a nervous director who is completely shocked to see a VIP looking to adopt. Rocking his signature black-scaled drip, Wilda looks incredibly intimidating and mysterious. The director complains about the overwhelming number of orphans lately and points out a specific child down the hall. Sitting barefoot and completely miserable, the kid is so new to the orphanage that he doesn't even have a name yet. Wilda steps up to the boy, reveals his identity as a black mage, and hits him with a brutal ultimatum. The kid can either stay in this dump and rot or leave with Wilda. Terrified, the boy bursts into tears and begs the mage to take him away so he doesn't die. Smirking, Wilda scoops the boy up, officially declaring him his new disciple and telling him to hold his head high. Since the kid needs an identity, Wilda casually names him Charles, kicking off a surprisingly wholesome master-student dynamic. Older Wilda narrates how black mages share a bond even tighter than blood. He later took in a second student, arrogantly believing his absolute power was enough to protect them both. But reality hits like a freight train. A terrifying memory flashes, showing a bloody, severed arm left on the cold ground. Wilda realizes he totally spoiled Charles, leaving the kid completely lacking the ruthless vigilance a black mage needs to survive. Although Wilda eventually hunted down and absolutely obliterated the mage who killed Charles, he was never able to recover his student's body or soul. He screams in pure agony, utterly devastated by the permanent loss of his favorite pupil. The nightmare fades and an older, traumatized Wilda gasps for air, forever burdened by his greatest failure. Back in the present, he takes off his mask, wondering if his strange dream about his master was actually a sign from destiny. Sitting alone in his hidden safe house, he bitterly admits that if he had just half of his own master's wisdom, Charles would still be alive. He desperately wonders if Charles somehow slipped through the cracks of the dream world before his soul was destroyed. But he quickly burns a piece of paper, mocking himself for holding on to such a delusional miracle. Suddenly, a knock echoes through the hideout. Wilda completely freezes, knowing this is a top-secret location that only he and Charles ever knew about. A hooded figure stands outside in the pouring rain, calling out to his teacher and claiming to be Charles. The mysterious boy explains that during the fatal ambush years ago, he was thrown into a shallow crack in the dream world and miraculously survived. Desperate and shivering, the figure echoes the exact same words from his childhood, begging his master to take him away so he doesn't die. Without another word, the boy collapses face first into the flooded street. Wilda stands frozen in the rain, completely shook to his core, stammering out his dead student's name in pure disbelief.